chapter 1. We are going to be reading chapter 1 of Rangers, RVs, and Revenge. Chapter 1. Over here, Dottie swaggered, wildly waved her arms over her head. She jumped up from the metal fold-up lawn seat we'd brought from Happy Trails Campground. A piece of wrapped candy whizzed by our heads. Dottie scrambled around the chair, giving the kid behind us a snarl after he snatched up the sweet treat before she could grab it. "Did you see that youngin'?" she spat, sitting back down on the edge of her seat like a baseball catcher ready for another chance. "He had a sack full of candy already." The sunshine beat down and the warm summer breeze funneled through the crowd that lined both sides of Main Street that ran through downtown Normal. Like us, they came to view the parade kicking off Daniel Boone Day. "I bet Abby will have some good stuff," Dottie elbowed me, gawking at the float for the Normal Public Library coming down the street toward us where we'd planted ourselves in front of the Laundry Club laundromat. "Look," I pointed to the passing float with the school kids on it. They were all dressed up in period costumes from the Daniel Boone era. "It's Beck Greer. Hey, Beck," I waved. Dottie and I smiled as proud as peacocks at our younger employee. He stood in the middle of the float with one leg hitched up on a fake log, an axe in his hand, and a coonskin cap on top of his head. He turned when he heard us call him, and a huge grin grew on his face when we made eye contact. "Get a picture, May," Dottie kept waving at him. I fumbled for my phone, but by the time I'd gotten the camera app open, the float had passed. "You get it? We can post it on the community board in the recreation room." "Yep," I sighed and decided not to tell her that I didn't get it since her thought was passing and soon she'd forget. The Normal High School band really got the crowd cheering and pumped. The classic cars were next, revving their fancy engines and creating car exhausts that almost ran us out of our chairs, only to be followed up by one of the sheriff's car, a couple of ranger trucks, and a fire engine. "Now, is that necessary?" Dottie put her fingers in her ear and gave it a couple of good shakes. "Alheimer doesn't need to put on that sirens that loud." I could barely hear her complaint over the tune of the sheriff's siren. "It's a parade," I reminded her, and decided to take her mind off the siren. "Oh, look, it's the National Park Committee float." Donnie craned her neck to see who was on it. "Did y'all get candy?" "No, Dottie. We decided to do a little timeline of the Daniel Boone journey." I waved at my fellow committee members who had volunteered to be on the float during the parade. I was one of the volunteers who had decorated the float. It had been in the making for over the month, and I'd spent most of my free time at the Milkery Dairy Barn, where we had parked the float in one of Mary Elizabeth's barns so we could work on it. Mary Elizabeth was my foster-turned-adopted mother, and she co-owned the local dairy farm with Don Gentry. They had a lot of land, and since the weather in the Daniel Boone National Forest was somewhat unpredictable at times, it was best to keep the wagon we decorated on the float indoors until it was finished rather than out in the elements. "Candy!" Dottie screamed and got to her feet when the cookie crumble float started to pass by. Christine Watson saw Dottie and waved her over to give Dottie her own personal handful. "It's good stuff too," Dottie returned and sat down. She put the candy in her lap. "I'm going to go grab a water. Do you want one?" I asked, knowing it would be okay to leave her now that she was satisfied with her loot. "Nah, I'm good," she mumbled through a mouthful of something chewy. "I'll be back." I looked back at the parade to make sure I wasn't missing seeing someone I knew. This was the part of the parade where the high school color guard was followed by the rifle team, the archery team, and then the saddle club. Coke Ogden, the owner of the old train station motel, was the president of the saddle club, which made perfect sense due to the fact that she had several horse barns that offered tourist trail rides on horseback. "I'll take 2 bottled waters," I told the vendor who was carrying a cooler by a strap that hung around his neck. "How about a twirly whirl, cotton candy, swirl sucker?" Every time I waved my hand no, he continued to try to upsell me. "Just 2 waters." I suddenly jerked around when I heard someone knocking on a display window behind me. Helen Pyle was sparkling head to toe in bright orange lipstick and different colored jewels she'd bedazzled on her white short sleeve top. Her shirt was tucked up in her mom jeans that were pulled clear up to the bottom of her boobs. I tried not to look at the orange-tinted hair that was piled in a mess on top of her head when she waved me toward Cuticles, her salon. "You want a cotton candy?" the vendor tried one more time. "All good." I took a couple of bucks in my pocket and handed them to him. "Keep the change." "Thanks, lady." He nodded and moved on. "Cotton candy, twirly whirls, get your water," he screamed, making his way along the parade route. "Excuse me," I made my way through the crowd, filling the sidewalk between me and Cuticles. "What's up?" I asked Helen when she greeted me at the door. She quickly shut it behind us after she rushed me in. She wasn't alone. Her two best friends were in there with her, Pam Purcell and Carol Wise. Each woman stood beside Helen, not bickering about who had the better fruit, which was unusual. Pam and Carol took pride in their ability to make the perfect jam, but today they looked as though they'd called a truce. "What's going on?" I asked cautiously as I charted this new territory with them. "Are y'all trying to get me into the chair?" I plunged my hands into my curly brown hair, a little more unruly today than usual, but it was because the humidity had ticked up overnight and it wasn't a hair washing day for me. It took an hour to fix my hair, and when you ran a campground, it wasn't necessary to get all primed up. I saved those times for when I went on dates with Hank Sharp. "No," Pam's voice squeaked. She shook her head, her short silver hair not budging with movement. "Have you seen today's paper?" Carol asked in her southern drawl. Her eyes bored into me like I had some sort of say in what went into the Normal Gazette. "It's a disgrace to our community." Her voice broke as she looked at Helen. "I can't bear to think of the repercussions this is going to have on our economy." Helen lifted her hand to the corner of her eye and dabbed it with a tissue as if she was tearing up. The three of them stood there all doe-eyed. Carol's lips pinched. She tucked a strand of her long black hair behind her shoulder. "Well, what are you going to do about it?" Carol pulled a folded paper from underneath her arm and held it out for me to take. "Do about it?" I took the paper. "I didn't even know what you're talking about." Helen took a couple of backward steps further into the Pepto-Bismol salon before she let herself fall back into one of the pink, puffy salon chairs. The twinkly lights around the walls and ceiling made this seem so much more dramatic, though I had no idea what was going on. "I just might faint." She held the back of her hand up to her forehead. "I won't be able to show my face in this town again." "Well, isn't that a bit much?" I asked and snapped the paper open. "You don't have to turn the page. It's right there, front and center." Carol's eyes dropped. "It looks like we need to let Waldo Wynn know how things work around here." "I hope she goes bald" was the title of the piece on the front of the page of the Normal Gazette, alongside a photo of Helen Pyle cutting someone's hair inside of Cuticles with a big old smile on her face. There was some text which I had not read between Helen's photo and another photo of a young woman with wavy blonde hair sitting on a piano bench, a beauty queen sash laid neatly across her body. "And I swear he made my hair brighter than it really is." Helen had one more thing to worry about other than the color of her hair that the photo made her look. Little did she realize her hair in the photo was exactly the same color orange that it was in real life. But who was I to comment? I didn't. I kept my mouth shut. Waldo Wynn was the new reporter for the Normal Gazette and Channel 2 News. He'd recently taken the job after Violet Reinhammer moved away from our little tourist town here in Kentucky. Waldo wasn't familiar with our town and how we operated, so to say he ruffled a few feathers over the last few months was an understatement. And when it came to beauty around here, the headline was downright insult to Southern women of this town. "Cuticles is a staple, a safe place where women can talk and complain about their husband. It's a sacred space, and words do not leave these walls. That's..." Helen's lips tightened and the lines around her mouth deepened. She pointed to the paper in my hand. That so-called reporter thinks he can just waltz in here and develop years upon years of hair industry. He's got another thing coming to him. She started to hyperventilate. Her sobs escaped. We need Violet back. She looked at me. Can you get Violet to come back? I heard Millie Kay and Evan were getting divorced. Millie Kay packed up everything and mailed it to Violet. She's been gone since Mother's Day. Carol nodded, a confident look on her face. I know Violet isn't going to come back, so we're stuck with Waldo for now. I tried to offer Helen a sympathetic smile and looked back down to the article. He could have put in a different title on it, Pam said with disgust, obviously concerned for her friend. Not to mention the fact someone violated Arcona's silence. She circled her finger through the air, gesturing around the salon. Helen was only venting. She didn't mean anything by her comment. The fact has already hurt her business. Hurt your business? Now this had me stop to listen, really listen, to see if there was a cause for concern. I moved to Normal after I was left penniless with only a rundown camper and a campground to my name. It took everything I had to pull myself up on my bootstraps, and I'd come up with a big plan to revitalize the entire town in the process. With the help of these ladies, as well as a group of my friends, the Laundry Club ladies, the economy in Normal was booming. So when I heard someone in our community was jeopardized and one of our own, I took offense to it. Why, yes, it's the first time in 30 years Miss Daniel Boone hasn't come here to get her hair and nails done before the parade. Helen pointed to the far wall where the glittery gold frames hung. I've already had some cancellation, and I know it's because of the article. I'll be ruined because of her. My business is already suffering, and I'll have to shut down. She jabbed her finger at the wall. Tradition! It was a wall I'd seen many times before, but I'd never taken the time to even look at the photos it held. Now, taking a closer look, there was a picture of every single winner of the pageant sitting in one of those pink salon chairs with Helen standing proudly behind her. I've done all of their hair except the winner this year. She frowned as she looked at the empty frame at the far end, waiting for this year's pageant winner photo. Alice Beekman wouldn't even take my calls. The moment of silence let the parade music filter into the salon. Cheers and applause along with the band music took up space, making all of us look out the window. Helen bolted out of her chair and hurried over to look at the final float passing by. Your mama and Coke Ogden both called and canceled this morning. Pam's lips curled in and her forehead wrinkled. Helen flung her hand over her eyes. I just can't bear to look. Her chin fell to her chest. Pam, Carol, and I walked over to comfort her. I couldn't help but look out the window and watch the float carrying Alice and the other pageant contestants lining both sides. The float's banner along the side read, Miss Daniel Boone Days, Alice Beekman. There were 6 women standing along our side of the float and 6 along the other. Elbow, wrist, Helen's voice cracked as she named the movement of their arms. Now you'll see Alice do the little child wave. It was like Helen knew all the moves. As the float came to a stop in front of Cuticles, the total of 12 women turned to look at the log chair in the back of the vehicle where Alice Beekman proudly sat. Elbow wave, elbow wave. Helen's words were almost a whisper, mirroring Alice's move. Little child wave. Helen tore away from the window and looked down towards her shoulder as if it was unbearable to watch Alice stand up, bend over slightly, and give little finger waves to the little girls hollering for her attention along the parade route. What does the hair look like? Helen begged to know. Terrible! Rat's nest! Pam grimaced when she looked at me and then shrugged as if to ask, what was I supposed to say? Alice looked great. Her hair was parted down the middle and laid in waves as it cascaded down her back. Her Miss Daniel Boone Day crown sparkled with each turn, complimentary to her smile. She was breathtaking. I let it slip. Breathtakingly awful hairstyle. I gulped back the compliment. And see, that's what you get when you go in search of something and break a 30-year-long rule, Helen cried out, quickly turning on the balls of her feet and running to the back of the salon to disappear to the room where she mixed all the colors for hair dye. She does look good. Carol kept her southern drawl slow and very low so Helen couldn't hear her. What is this about being bald? I asked, since I hadn't had a lot of time to read the article. I had my own issues to deal with. Dottie. Apparently, Waldo came in here to do a story after sniffing around after he overheard someone saying Alice was breaking tradition. Pam told us how Helen got a call from Waldo wanting to do a story, but he didn't tell her on the phone that he had confirmed Alice wasn't going to come to Cuticles to get her hair and nails done. Instead, he sprang it on Helen while he was here to do the interview. Overheard, I snorted, knowing good and well someone had called him. Right. Carol's brows wiggled, sarcasm pulling from her words. We have a snitch that comes here. Waldo needs to know we take tradition in Kentucky very serious. Just as serious as we do going to church, Pam added. And you know, we ain't seen him come to church either. Pam was referring to the Normal Baptist Church. She, along with Carol and Helen, were part of the Bible Thumpers, or at least that's what I called them. They were a small group of women at the church who, along with my dear friend Bets Hager, did Bible study, ministered to the prisoners at the state penitentiary not too far from here, and had a prayer chain. It was more like a gossip hotline, but they claimed it wasn't gossip and they were praying. Whatever you wanted to call it or however you looked at it, someone had let the cat out of the bag, and here we were today, 30 years of tradition broken. He has no regard for our town, Carol spewed, turning her attention back to the parade. Well, there's nothing we can do about it today, I told them, and put the paper down on the counter. I guess I need to talk to him, or I can get the committee to talk to him about having some sort of sensitivity filter. Sensitivity filter? Mae West, have you gone and lost your marbles? He's flat out, single-handedly, in one line, ruined our friend. Carol jabbed her finger at the counter where the paper lay. I hope she goes bald isn't something you want your hairdresser to say about no one. And the fact Helen has had cancellations since this came out in the paper this morning doesn't look good for her economy, and she might have to shut down. Let's just hope Miss Daniel Boone Days doesn't go bald. I had no control over how the public took the headline as of this moment, making it difficult for me to even say what might come and what might not come. But I assure you, we will cross that bridge if we come to it. I can't stand here and watch this no more. Helen bolted out the door and got lost in the crowd. I glanced over at Helen's two best friends. We all just sort of stared at one another. And little did I realize we'd be crossing that bridge by the end of the night. Chapter 1 of Rangers, RVs, and Revenge.